Morning and good afternoon, and warmly welcome to everyone, to our esteemed guests, to the Minister, Lieutenant Governor, speakers, and to more than 800 people who have signed up online to attend today's webinar. Warmly welcome. We are here today to discuss how we can build back not just better, but how can we build back greener. The headline of today is Principles for Kickstarting the Sustainable Transition Through Partnerships. The aim of this event is to create a platform for discussions around a green economic recovery after a global health crisis. We have high-level decision makers from two frontrunner states in the green field, New York State and Denmark, and we will look into how we can support and inspire each other in achieving ambitious goals. My name is Connie Hedegaard. I'm a former minister in Denmark and a former EU Commissioner for Climate. And today I'm your moderator, and we'll try and take care that we will have a good 1 hour here together. I must say we are honored that today's webinar will be opened by two remarks from two important voices in the global climate debate. First, we'll hear from the Danish Minister of Climate, Energy and Utilities, and he will be followed by remarks from the New York State Lieutenant Governor. Thereafter, we will have no less than 3 fireside chats where both American and Danish stakeholders will discuss different aspects of partnerships and the green economic recovery. Today's event is organized by NYSERDA, Danish Cleantech Hub New York, Confederation of Danish Industry, and State of Green, who in partnership have put together today's program, and of course hoping that that can inspire to further dialogue. On behalf of the organizers, we're looking forward to the discussion for the next 60 minutes. So let's get started. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first speaker of today, the Danish Minister for Climate, Energy and Utilities, Mr. Dan Jørgensen. Last year, Denmark, the government, and a very broad majority in the Danish parliament set a very ambitious climate target of reducing 70% emissions by 2030. And also last year, the government launched 13 climate partnerships with the private sector and invited these 13 different sectors to come up with their bit as to how could they help delivering on these ambitious targets. So, Minister, please, the stage is now yours, and we're looking forward to hear your bit as to how partnerships can help boost a green economic recovery. Dan Jørgensen, you have the floor, please.
Thank you so much, Connie, and let me first of all thank you all for participating. I'm extremely honored and happy to be a part of New York Climate Week. I would have preferred it to actually be in New York. Personally, I love visiting New York, obviously, but we are in the middle of an unprecedented global health crisis. This, of course, poses many challenges, but it also gives us some opportunities, and that is what I will talk to you about today. Let me first state that the relationship between Denmark and the US has top priority for the Danish government. Denmark and the United States have never experienced an interruption in our diplomatic relations since they were established in 1801. So we have a long and proud relationship together. Now, in the middle of a crisis, obviously policies will be set back. Obviously, many countries will struggle to even have the most basic needs of their citizens taken care of. This goes without saying. Also, in Denmark, we have had to postpone negotiations that we would have held. We've had to postpone some decisions. Nonetheless, we are firmly committed that this crisis is a crisis that we will get through. It's not a permanent crisis, whereas the climate crisis has a more permanent character and is one that we cannot forget in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. We have decided, as Connie Hedegaard said, in Denmark, to reduce our emissions by 70% in 2030 compared to 1990. This is legally binding now. It's a climate act that's been adopted in the Danish parliament. We think it's probably one of the most ambitious in the world. It's definitely a difficult task. It means that we will have to reduce with as much from now till 2030 as we've done from 1990 till now. So this is a huge task. It means that we will have to fundamentally transform the way we produce, the way we transport ourselves, the way we eat, the way we compete. And this means that we need to adopt different sector strategies for all major sectors of the Danish society. And to that end, we have made partnerships with our business communities, with our different sectors. They have worked for several months writing recommendations for the governments, and we are now starting to implement these recommendations. And we had more than 400 concrete proposals, and many of them has already been put into law now. Obviously, with a huge transformation like the one that we are facing now, we will need regulation, we will need subsidies, we will need the transformation of the way we tax, put a price on carbon. There's not one solution, there's many solutions. Some will be a challenge to our private companies and our industries in Denmark, but many of them will be the opposite. Many of them will actually help our companies and industries compete in the future. And I think that is also probably the reason why we have a very strong support in the business community and in the industries of Denmark to our 70% target. Now, if we look at what we have concretely done already, something that we've chosen to keep making important decisions about, even though we're in the midst of this terrible pandemic, because we think it will actually set forward some very important signals for the market and also help create jobs even on the short run. These are things like deciding to more than triple our offshore wind capacity. Many of you might know that we were the first country in the world to build an offshore wind farm in 1991. Since then, of course, a lot has happened. Technology has developed so that today offshore wind can compete in price with coal in most places on the planet. This is obviously extremely good news. But now we're moving a step ahead. We are not only building offshore wind, we're also building energy islands that will serve as hubs for other countries and combining this with Power-to-X technology. So that's just to give you some very concrete examples. I could speak for hours about this. My time is already up. So I will just wish you all a very good webinar. Again, maybe we'll see each other physically in New York in the future. I definitely hope so. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Minister, and thank you for taking your time to having these opening remarks today, and good luck with the huge endeavor in actually implementing this ambitious target that you have set. Now let me introduce to you our next speaker, Lieutenant Governor of New York State, Mrs. Kathy Hochul. Since 2015, the Lieutenant Governor has served as the highest ranking female elected official in New York State government. Across New York, she works to champion policies to help combat climate change and build back better our economies through historic investments in clean energy. Mrs. Kathy Hochul, how do we kickstart a sustainable transition on the backdrop of COVID-19, and how can New York take the position as a global leader in climate and clean energy? What does it take? You have the floor, please.
Well, thank you, Connie, and I appreciate this opportunity to address you, and what an incredible gathering of people from around the globe, not just New York, not just Denmark, but I'm seeing a lot of people pop up from around the planet, and This is not an issue that's going to be resolved by the state of New York or the country of Denmark. It takes a global response. And so I appreciate this opportunity, and also to listen to the ambitious goals of Denmark from the minister who just spoke, and to know we have a great team of individuals from New York that you'll also be hearing from. But to address your question, a year ago, we gathered here in New York City during our annual Climate Week, which always occurs during UN Week. And the state of New York signed an MOU with the country of Denmark to really cement our common objectives to have sustainability goals that we believe are going to be important for the health of our nation. Little did we know that at this time, health of our country and the rest of the world. Little did we know at that time that we'd be wrestling with dual challenges, dual crises. One is a direct threat to the health of our people, that is COVID-19, in addition to the direct threat to the health of our planet, which is climate change. And we no longer talk about the threat of climate change. It is the reality of climate change. It is hitting us now. And if you're watching the news reports that come in from the other side of our country, the extraordinary devastation wrought by wildfires in Oregon and California, simultaneously with the southern part of our country being battered with the ferocity of hurricanes. And New York State was hit with a hurricane itself. New York State, a hurricane not that long ago. So we're living this. We're living the effects right now. So we approach this with a sense of urgency, even during a global pandemic. We are not resting on this concept, well, we'll wait till everything settles down with this pandemic and then get back to achieving our ambitious energy goals. Because a year ago, we put the stake in the ground. We said that New York State will have the most ambitious clean energy, green energy plan in the nation, and we're committed to furthering those goals. But it's not just what New York State can do. We can get it under control here in New York, but the impact on the rest of the planet is what we have to address in partnerships. So partnerships with countries like Denmark, working with the private sector. And we're continuing through the pandemic. For example, in July, we were still having very high infection rates. And I'm proud to say that New York now has a 0.9% infection rate. We do constant testing. So we're feeling good about the pandemic today. But we also said, even while this is going on, we have to continue pursuing our climate objectives. So in July, we announced our largest solicitation for offshore wind, for example. We know Denmark has been a leader a long time, and it's a shame that there were not policies in all of our countries that would do exactly what Denmark was doing back then. And we're not going to wait for the federal government to lead in our country. We're not doing that, because when the United States walked away from our commitments under the Paris Climate Agreements, the state of New York didn't sit back and say, well, that's a federal issue. We teamed up with other states, like-minded states like California, Oregon, and Washington, and others, and really represent now 40%, almost 50% of the U.S. economy, in saying that we will adhere to those same goals. So I want to just leave the message that we understand not just the threat, but the reality of climate change here in the state of New York, but also that we're doing something about it. And as we recover from this pandemic, it has wreaked havoc on our economy. We know that. It's also denied a lot of people their employment. We had a very low unemployment rate heading into this pandemic. It is extraordinarily high right now. We also believe that our investments in clean energy, in the green economy, as we build back greener, means that more people need to be trained in these areas, whether it's in solar, whether it's in wind, whether renewables. We are focusing on making sure that not just are we nation leading, but also that we have an opportunity for more New Yorkers to seek employment. And that's an important objective as mine, as someone who works on economic development and energy issues for the Cuomo administration. So I want everyone to know that our commitment is not wavering as we still battle this pandemic. It is still strong, because we cannot miss a single day of moving forward toward saving our planet. And that's the scale of what we're talking about. That is the sense of urgency that all of you on this call have, or you wouldn't be taking your time today. So I thank you. And I so look forward to welcoming you back. I wish I could see all of you in New York City this week. The weather's spectacular. I shouldn't rub it in, but it's about 78 degrees out. Beautiful day. We are going to continue driving down our infection rates. So this time next year, everyone will feel safe to be able to come back to the city of New York and have these important global conversations. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy Hochul. And I'm sure that we are many that share that hope about next year. Thank you very much for your strong message. And I also think that we are many that share the hope that New York can set an example for all of the United States. Thus, we had our two opening statements. And before we continue, we will have just a very, very short break, half a minute or so. So please stay tuned. One question, if you would give me sort of your initial reflections. We have now heard from both the minister and the lieutenant governor that thinking climate and economic recovery together. Welcome to our first fireside chat. With us here in Copenhagen, we have Christoffer Bøtzau, Director General of the Danish Energy Agency, and we have Thomas Bustrup, who is the COO of the Confederation of Danish Industry. And with us on the screen from New York, I guess it is, we have Ali Saidi, Deputy Secretary for Energy and Environment and Chairman of Climate Policy and Finance, Office of Governor Cuomo. I would like to start all of you three off with sort of trying to reflect on the question. We heard sort of how we have to combine the recovery and our green transition. How can partnerships support this goal? It's such a nice buzzword, but when we make it sort of for real, how can partnerships support this goal? Maybe we could start here with Christoffer Bøtzau.
Thank you. Well, I think we especially need partnership in this time of urgency. We need partnership between Denmark and New York State. We need partnership between the private sector and the public sector, because we need to do this in common. We need to secure the greening of our economy, the creating of jobs, and at the same time do whatever we can to solve the climate issues and problems that stands before us.
Ali, from New York, how could you give us some examples how stakeholders in the New York State are working together with the private sector to actually achieve the climate goals?
Absolutely. So first of all, great to be with all of you. And I think this notion of reaching out and bringing as many people along in participating in the transition that we see in front of ourselves is something that's core to the way Governor Cuomo has approached climate action here in the state. One example of that is is making sure that there are clear rules of the road and opportunity for private capital to invest alongside public capital. You see that in our offshore wind port solicitation, where there's a real driver to get private capital in supporting the construction of the infrastructure that's going to be needed and paired with our expansion into offshore wind. We see that in other places as well. I think it's important to not constrain the notion of partnership just to attracting private capital, but also to focusing on talent development. We enjoy a great deal of partnership with our building trades here in New York, developing the skilled workforce that we need to build the projects that are going to be required to decarbonize our grid. And finally, I think it's important, again, when we talk about partnerships, we tend to focus on the macro level, state to state, nation to nation. It's important to also partner with the folks who are on the front lines in the communities that are being impacted from climate change, the communities that can provide the solutions to climate change. And that's why here in New York, as we implement our climate law, which codifies the governor's vision, we really put an emphasis on engaging with communities, on providing them the tools and capacity to be leaders in forging the solution to climate.
Thank you so much. Thomas Bustrup, Confederation of Danish Industry have been working on this, the 13 climate partnerships, where suddenly it became sort of for real. What could you really offer there? How would you sort of see the real difference between business as usual and then the ideas of partnerships? Have you seen anything being promoted more than would else have been the case?
Definitely, and I think the 13 climate partnerships, which were also mentioned by the Danish minister, is quite a unique example, and it illustrates exactly that on this on this topic, as you also mentioned, partnerships are necessary. For us as a business association, I think if we see 5-10 years back, we would not have seen such a setup where both government and a large part of the Danish business sector, at least companies with our dealing with green solutions, a large number of these companies have been very, very engaged in these climate partnerships. So CEOs of top companies of all sectors have engaged a lot of personal time into these partnerships, and I think it's a unique example, and it illustrates that within this topic, it's absolutely necessary, and it also illustrates that there are common interests. I mean, partnerships tends to work better when you have common interest and not conflicting interest. And I think the interest of most governments, short-term economic recovery, yes, but long-term is climate and sustainability in general. And for companies, it is most of them exactly the same. Short-term, yes, of course, trying to deal with the huge economic challenges that they have right now, but on the longer term, they see climate and sustainability as a very, very important part of their business strategy.
But it sounds very nice, yes, and easy. Very nice. But what are the obstacles? Where are sort of the difficult parts there? Because it sounds as if easy to do, but probably it's easier to write the sectoral papers than to actually implement these partnerships.
It has not been easy to write. I'm just saying that it's quite a unique example. I think what will matters in the end is also what are the wishes for individuals. I mean, what are you and me and you? I mean, how will our behavior be in the future? Because I mean, we are the future customers of the business sectors. So if we also have a demand for driving towards sustainability, driving towards a better climate, then businesses will also be really forced to go in that direction. And it is exactly the same with governments. Most governments, at least in the world, luckily, are still dependent on voters in the future. And if we as individuals, when we go and put our ballot into the voting box, if we think more and more about sustainability and climate, then that will also drive the political and government agenda.
Seen from the other side, so to speak, Christopher, but so you have sort of seen, I mean, you're representing the policy or the regulator side of this. What are the big obstacles in order to translate this, transform it from nice intentions into real politics where you can shortcut to better solutions than would else have been the case?
Well, of course, there's the money question. But even though it's about money, we have seen in Denmark that most all parties in the Danish parliament get together and made a climate action plan for more than 10 billion Danish kroner. And a lot of the initiatives were copies from the climate partnerships, actually. So I think that the Danish case shows that it's possible to have climate partnership in the business environment and take it to the political stage and let it be policies that you can implement from my authority. Very fast, actually.
Okay. Ali Zaidi, I wondered, in New York, we have all followed during last spring the many challenges in New York following the COVID-19 crisis. And then coming from the political side myself, I know that, you know, when there are really big challenges, there is also a limit as to how many topics can you sort of focus on at one time. And you're at the same time you have a drop in GDP, the economic resources are strained. What is your experience? How can you really keep the attention also on the green transformation during these times?
Look, you saw it for those who are watching the governor's daily press conference talking about COVID and the state's vigorous response. At the same time, he was acknowledging the interconnection between the crisis that we faced in the form of that pandemic and the public health crisis that is spurred by local pollution and a changing climate and our reliance on uncontrolled fossil emissions. He was always also talking about the opportunity we had and have now to build back better, to learn from the challenges we were facing and come out the other end with an economy that was better aligned with these objectives of keeping our communities healthy and safe. And I think that's one of the key things for us to keep in mind is that interconnection between public health and action on climate. By tackling sources of pollution, we get benefits right away in the form of local air pollution benefits, making our air easier to breathe. And then very rapidly, we start to bend the curve on the increasing pace at which climate has been changing, which is we're being, feeling in the United States in the fury of the wildfires and increasing intensity and frequency of hurricanes. So it's all interconnected, and you saw Governor Cuomo make that case. It's certainly guiding our approach here in New York.
Thank you so much. Thomas Bustrup, these are challenging times also for our economies and for the industries and the companies that you are representing. To maintain commercial competitiveness in this environment and at the same time reduce emissions. We so often say that it goes very, very fine hand in hand. Is that a bit too rosy picture? Is it a myth? Or could you come up with some examples that it really is the future reality?
It's not maybe it's a rosy picture, but I think that at least in Denmark, many of the companies, also around the world, but maybe even to a higher extent in Denmark, the companies, they want to be part of the solution. Also the companies that are having, for example, high emissions. I mean, we have one you ask for examples. We have one cement producer left in Denmark. Producing cement creates high emissions, CO2 emissions. But I mean, that single company now has as their main target, above profitability, their main target is to produce cement in the future in the best environmental way all over the world. And I mean, as long as you have companies driving that agenda, I think that it's not a rosy picture, but I think there is hope, at least. There is hope for the future. So that is companies within all sectors. So it's not only companies producing green solutions and energy efficiency, it's also companies in all sectors. As long as you have some main driver and inspirators that would influence, as you tend to say, that would try and have an effect on the entire competition, on the entire sector. I think not a rosy picture, but I think there is great hope.
Before we will end with Butzau here in the studio, I would like to go back to you, Ali Saidi, because it's hugely important that there is market sort of confident in the public commitments. Could you try and say a few words about sort of the public commitment and how you work with that in New York so that the companies would actually dare go down this path that we are asking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think these are mutually reinforcing elements, and that obviously makes sense in the context of partnership. The more we build the thing together, the more likely we are to reinforce each other's instinct towards greater ambition on climate. We've seen that here in New York, and look, we've codified into law our commitments on climate action. I think that gives a great deal of certainty for private capital, for private participants who want to take a bet and get involved in ambitious climate action. So I think that's a big piece of that. The governor's ability to get that codified in the law, make it an immovable target for us, is critical. But building it all together with everybody at the table, I think makes it durable.
Thank you. And then I would end up here with Christopher Butzau on now you have had, I mean, you sit there as sort of a very leading civil servant. You have 13 climate partnerships that came to your desk, so to speak, and you are partnering up with different parts of the world also. But how can you sort of combine all these things and also sort of find solutions that sometimes go across the silo mentality that we have a tendency of organizing everything in?
Well, first of all, you know, the Danish case is for inspiration. We are a very small country. We only have 0.1% of the global emissions. And if we want to do something at a global level, we need to inspire other countries, other states, as New York. And as I see it, the climate issue is sector coupling all the time. So we have done a lot when it comes to energy, when it comes to industry, but the next challenges is agriculture and transportation. And we still do not have the solutions in Denmark yet. We do not have it anywhere in the world, I think, but we need to couple the sectors. Not only think as a Danish Energy Agency, but talking with the other agencies. Go to the states, be inspired of how they are doing things. I think that the next steps when it comes to climate is to couple the sectors and find the common solutions.
Very important point, and reaching out also beyond one's own borders, be it in companies or in states.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much to our three panelists. And here again, we will have a very short break, and then we'll be back with our second fire chat. And welcome back to our second session, our second fireside chat today, which will be about partnerships as a way to support innovation, growth, and job creation. With us on the panel, we have Mrs. Doreen Harris, Acting President and CEO, NYSERDA, who is with us on the screen here. Welcome to you. And here by my side is Jens Birgersson, CEO and President, Rockwool International, the world's leading manufacturer of stone wool. Welcome also to us, to you. Well, we already heard that there is not one single silver bullet solution to accelerating the green transition. We really have to sort of touch upon many different areas where we can do things. What role do partnerships play in such circumstances, and what are the most important components to mainstream innovative green technologies or in finding new ways of attacking the challenge? What is your experience, Jens Birgersson?
Partnerships. Yeah. So first of all, whatever you can solve yourself, solve it as a company. So that's the
without interference with too many others.
If we can solve it, we can contribute. Go for that. But what you have here is, say, the issue of a green start, creating jobs, getting going, and use this as an opportunity. And then the problem is simply too big. We might have the technology, but we need to spread it. We might need funding. We might need the public sector to put in policy or goals in place, like Denmark did. Denmark did really ambitious goals. We might have NGOs that need to kind of share the knowledge and help us find a way. So you simply realize you can't solve this alone. You know what you can do, and you just need to find a partner, sit down, because it's too big a challenge to do yourself.
Thank you. And Doreen Harris, what is your take on sort of partnerships as a way to shortcut to better innovation?
Yes, good morning, everyone from New York, and thank you again to the Danish Clean Tech Hub for having me today. I know we all had the pleasure to hear from Lieutenant Governor Hochul and Secretary Zaidi. However, from our perspective at NYSERDA, as the implementer of many of the clean energy programs, the best way to spur partnerships is really in three ways. The first is to provide market certainty, and you heard from Secretary Zaidi the reasons that New York has done so. Start with Governor Cuomo and the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that he signed into law and sets forth the market certainty that is needed to bring forth investments and therefore partnerships. We also need to innovate. And NYSERDA is the home of innovation for clean energy in New York, specifically investing in innovation as a form to bring technical, regulatory, and scale-up opportunities here in the state. And then the third is act. We need to act to achieve our goals. And this is an area where we have benefited greatly from our partnership with the Danish government to help us build programs and policies that are not only indicative of our goals, but indicative of our commitment to reach those goals. So in our view, through those three actions, we can bring forth the preconditions for these private-public partnerships to occur, and that we are seeing occur at scale here in New York.
Thank you so much, Doreen Harris. One of the three key points from Doreen Harris was this about market certainty. It's Birgersson. Policymakers are often good at setting sort of long-term targets, but there is also a tool called regulation and standards. Does that have a positive effect on innovation? Could you come up with specific examples, maybe where a standard or a building requirement, whatever, has helped speed up innovation in your company?
It's super important to dare to think through what regulation and what standard is needed, because if we get it and it's relatively equal for all, you could count on that business will solve it. So for example, in insulation products, If we get a standard, Norway, for example, are driving that, where they want to have a circularity of construction material, a third of the waste of the planet comes from housing. They start to drive it, and they also found innovation. We have had a program with the government there where we innovate and we develop a new melting technology where we can be more circular, we can take back old product, and we can drop CO2 with 85%. If they wouldn't have declared that this is the way we go, this is going to be the goal, we wouldn't have probably come to the conclusion that we should start in Norway to do it. And then they also have to fund it. And now soon we're going to switch on a brand new innovation in Norway thanks to that. So I would say these goals and these policies and standards, for example, the energy efficiency goal that is binding, not optional, but binding, a saving target that is binding, put it on us, make it relatively equal, and we will go for it and solve it. And when we can't solve it technically, we will then form partnership like we did here with universities or experts or other companies that have the same challenge. And companies will do that if they have a clear goal, but we need a clear goal and clear regulation. And New York, for example, has been extremely brave in some of the targets they put for buildings. Not every city go through the effort that New York has done to really understand it and put really, really tough goals that you can talk more about, but that's what you need to do.
Okay, Doreen Harris, you should comment on that.
Yes, of course. It is true that we see that certainty providing, again, the framework for the market investments that we see. I've worked in this industry for most of my career, and the word certainty is, again, foundational to the investments that we seek. So we in New York have not only our goals codified in law, but we also have established strong programs to advance the achievement of that goal with a regular rhythm, with certainty as to the rules, and clarity as to what we seek. And through that, in our view, not only are we able to bring forth private market actors to bring innovation and frankly, great investments in our state, which we seek in concert with the achievement of our goals. But we also provide the opportunity for that scale up to occur across all sectors, which is a foundational goal of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. As was just mentioned, our work is spanning all sectors. We have worked in the electricity sector for a very long time, and now have brand new technologies upon which to build, some of which we've learned very much from the European experience to advance. I mean, the great example of that is the offshore wind resource, as Secretary Beatty had indicated. However, it is also true that those investments do need to occur across other sectors, including the building sector, where we see over 35% of emissions coming from buildings, and not that different for our transportation sector as well. So when we look at a goal like the CLCPA, it sets forth actions in all sectors and therefore the investments as well.
Doreen Harris, could public procurement, say for instance in transportation, could that also speed up and fast forward innovation as you see it, if you used public procurement more strategically?
I'd say that generally there is a role for the public sector in all of these spaces with regard to advancing establishing the goals and setting forth a path to achieve them. We've established that very clearly in the renewables and energy efficiency space. And in fact, transportation is an area where we are now advancing very active investments in charging infrastructure, for instance. That's a great role for the public sector to say, we're going to create the infrastructure, just like we're going to create the transmission and the grid of the future. We're going to create the charging infrastructure for these vehicles. But we also have a lot more to do in other aspects of the transportation sector. So NYSERDA coupled with our regulator, has advanced very significant investments in that regard as well.
Mr. Berenson, I understood very well your first point. Do whatever you can as company on your own, but still you believe in the idea of partnerships. So if you should take sort of the idea of partnerships to the next level, where is it that partnerships could help, say, a company like Rockwool?
It has helped us a lot. And sometimes when we speak about partnership, you think that it's loose, it doesn't have an objective, it doesn't have a decision process, and you send in the people that you don't use for anything else. And that's often not the case. And when we sit and have a discussion like this, it's easy to hear the word, but then when you look at partnerships at work, you will see results, you see a clear challenge to solve, and it becomes quite easy. So some of the topics about the law on energy efficiency, for example, in New York, is very specific. You read it, this is powerful. And I just list some. I mean, the Norway case, where we are using a tremendous amount of energy, we came up with a scheme, and a public company financed by the government go in and take a third of the investment. And it's 100 million Danish krona to develop the technology and then drive it with hydrogen or water power, green power. We probably couldn't have done that in such a short time alone. We got the help with the funding and we agreed the requirements. We also set up the circular scheme. We have another example where we work on certain technologies and it's really big issues to solve. We can solve them. And we work together with a cement company they're a little bit ahead of us. And we take the Danish Technical University that have a couple of new PhDs on it. And then we form a partnership. And it's not hard to understand the purpose. I don't want to go into the detail. We have another one now where we look into plastic circularity. And we wrestle with we know what to deal with our material if we get it back, but how do we get it back to the factories? We make a partnership with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, with many other companies to discuss it. How do we set this up?
So you say that the challenges outgrow what individual companies actually can do.
And the partnership are quite concrete, tangible, and it's not abstract, even though the problems and the challenges are big. But often you take an issue and you work on that, and pretty soon you see what people can be involved. So
it's very often when you listen to companies and regulators try and come through with some kind of regulation, you often hear, oh no, don't do that. That is expensive. This is costly. But you're actually arguing that binding regulation pushes forward innovation faster than would else have been the case.
Yeah, I think so, because fundamentally to save the planet, you have, I think somebody in New York taught me that actually, the first priority is use less, green the rest, address the assets. All of those, if you get through it, especially use less, once you're through it and you produce with less emissions of CO2, you produce with less waste, less to landfill, you use a higher percentage of upcycled material. All of that drives company efficiency. So when you're done with it, at the beginning, you tend to say it's different to what we do today. It will cost money. But once you're through and you use less, you actually find that you do it also cheaper and more efficient.
Thank you very much. Doreen Harris, you have the last 30 seconds. Just what would come up top on your wish list if we should strengthen the partnership idea? Where is the biggest obstacle as you see it?
I think with regard to the achievement of our goals in New York, one of the biggest challenges that we have is workforce, the available workforce to serve what is a burgeoning and in some cases new industry here. So I would say that we as a state have invested significantly in workforce development even pre-COVID. However, now we see even more opportunity for that market transformation to bring workers into the clean energy industry who have otherwise been unemployed. So in terms of partnerships, there is talent and awareness in the private sector that needs to be brought to bear into these initiatives that the state would offer, that is needed to bring forth the skills and capabilities to serve this brand new industry.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to speak.
Very concrete message. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to both of our panelists. And when we come back after a few seconds here with the breaker, then we will talk about the needed investments. And welcome back for our third and last fireside chat of today, where investments in the green transition will be sort of the topic. As you know, money makes the world go around. In our panel here, we have Allan Polak, CEO, PFA Pension since 2015. And with us, joining us from New York, we have Alfred Griffin, President, New York Green Bank. Very warm welcome to you as well. I know that for 25 years, I think it is, you have been working on financing, how to finance renewable energy and energy efficiency. A pleasure to have you with us here today. I would like to hear from both of you. How can the financial sector help us scale up and speed up? We have been discussing this for years and years and years. Things are starting to move in the right direction, but there are still some obstacles. How can we do even more, Allan Polak?
Yeah, they are moving in the right direction. You're right, Connie, but thank you for asking me. And it is true that we have these high ambitions, as we heard today, from countries, from state, even more. Cities are actually moving up their ambitions, and a lot of corporates are committing themselves. And on the other side, we have us in the financial industry, and particularly I would like to highlight the savings industry, the long-term savings, because we have all-time high savings. Money are pulling into the savings products, even more now under the present health crisis. So how do we combine these? A lot of money in long-term savings, and we have a need, but we cannot really combine it.
So what to do?
What to do? And I think the way to do it is actually gradually to transform some of our products into clearer and distinct green products, because we need to make sure that we have the clients behind us in this transformation. If we just change our, let's call it classical product, without really telling our clients that's what we're doing, then we might one day risk that someone will say, hey, we are not behind you any longer. So I recommend that we gradually transform our products with binding commitments to, let's call it greener products or more sustainable products, with clear commitments to these goals.
Very clear statement. How does that sound for you, Alfred Griffin?
Well, it sounds like a great idea, and Allan and Connie, great to be joining you today. And good afternoon and good morning to folks around the world. Pleasure to be part of this panel. So when we think about clean energy and the deployment of clean energy, it really starts where the last couple of speakers left off. It's the markets are in large part driven by having good policy and ambitious goals that ultimately stimulates market activity. And where you have this market activity, there's a need for financing. We have very long-lived assets with heavy upfront investments that generate cash flow over long periods of time, which means there are substantial financial needs that require lots of upfront costs. And so we at New York Green Bank seek to ensure that where there are economically viable projects that are financeable and scalable, that such projects actually get done. And that's really the role we play. There are organizations like PFA that have substantial amounts of capital, hundreds and hundreds of billions of capital that I think it's fair to say, and certainly, from a PFA pension standpoint, looking for clean energy assets to invest in, and the role we play at New York Green Bank is help these types of assets scale up such that they will attract these large institutional dollars like those at PFA.
But maybe you could expand a bit on that, Alfred Griffin, because I understand that the New York Green Bank is a state-sponsored financial entity that works with the private sector. So why is it that you need some kind of semi-public engagement like that also?
Right. Well, we are a New York State-sponsored organization. We're an initiative of Governor Andrew Cuomo and established in December of 2013. We're a $1 billion organization. And our mission is to accelerate deployment of clean energy in New York by helping to overcome financing barriers. I think it's fair to say that there is almost unlimited institutional capital looking for assets to invest in the clean energy space. The issue is that even if you have well-structured transactions that are credit worthy and have attractive pricing, that if you don't have precedent and you don't have scale, it can be difficult to attract that capital. The reality is that most of your project finance teams, securitization teams, structured finance teams that are often needed to finance the deployment of clean energy reside at the world's largest insurance companies, the global banks, the global pensions that need to be able to invest hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. And where you have, say, $1 billion transaction or $1 billion portfolio of distributed assets that's well structured, it's not difficult to find financing for that. But where you have a similar portfolio for a newer business model that is also well structured and very creditworthy, but it's in the, say, 25 to 50 to $75 million range, it can be much more difficult to find that capital. And so we focus on those markets that we expect to find scale and the ability to put meaningful capital to work, that we will ultimately, if we can help these newer business models scale up, that we will in effect crowd in that private capital, will be refinanced, and we will redeploy our capital in the next frontier business model. And we have invested over $1 billion, recycled half of that, $500 million. So I think we're proving that there is a role for us to play here.
Thank you. Alan Pollack, last year during the New York Climate Week, your pension fund, together with other Danish pension funds, promised, I think you pledged to give $46 billion for the green transition in Denmark. Could you try and give some examples? What kind of projects would it be where this sort of coalition of pension funds could go together and provide the investment capacity?
Yeah, I think it's important with these long-term commitments, because it means that all the stakeholders around us, they can start planning for this. All those who are creative and can see new products, they know that this money will gradually be transferred into green products. And yes, we see the first projects coming up. Now we are working on what we call an energy island. I think the minister even mentioned it. And that is at an early stage, but where we are financing the first research period in order to establish an island for transforming all the offshore windmills.
So it's not
energy.
a public, it's not taxpayers' money, it's private pensioners.
Sure, we can finance it purely, but of course it needs a framework that is set from a political entity. But the important thing in that is that this is really creative. There are 3 stages in this, and the first one is the transformation, energy transformation, and then we will even move on to power to X energy, and even if we are happy and technology supports it, storage. So this has a really wide range potential. And if we are successful in this, we can copy paste it basically in other markets, because yes, we do not need financing from the public sector. And that is very important. So there's a big potential, even you could say from a broader perspective than just our Danish scope.
So you can copy paste it to other projects and other fields, but also others could copy paste that model
Yeah.
because you think the experience is good
We are
enough so
open
far?
to debate the model and share it with others.
Okay. I wondered, Mr. Griffin, how do you work with the more traditional players? I mean, we have a tendency to talk about all the good green guys, those who want to do this, and that seems to be the easy part. But there are also a lot of companies that would be in the more traditional sectors. How do you work with them?
And are you referring to financial organizations
Yeah.
and investment firms? Yeah, we work with a broad range of parties, and I would say most of them are not exclusively focused on clean energy finance. The majority, if not almost all of the parties that we work with, have broad businesses that this is generally part of their broader initiatives, and we've had very good relationships. I think it's fair to say that it's hard to find really any financial institution that hasn't made some sort of commitments around clean energy finance. So whether it's insurance companies, whether it's large banks, smaller banks, they want to find ways to invest in these types of assets. So we work with those parties in different ways. We may provide warehouse finance for portfolio aggregation and then be refinanced by more term investors. We may be a bilateral lender and help prove out business models and then be refinanced once there's a bit more history. We may be a partner with a small group of lenders from the beginning, and be a partner that is solely focused on clean energy and can help in our partners' due diligence processes based on our experience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. Just lastly, Mr. Pollack, if you should have one wish as to how to take this to the next level, you must be doing some thinking in your organization that now it's starting to turn this into more and more green. What is the best obstacle that should be removed if you should work even more with partnerships?
You could say that in our industry, we work with listed and private investment. And private investment is highly regulated, how we work with them. And we need to facilitate that process a bit more because we are quite restricted in that. And in order to open up for us and other savings vehicles to invest more in private investments, because these projects, they are in early stages, they are private, they're not still yet listed. We need to facilitate that more. So on my wish list is to move on with regulators, how to open up in a controlled way for more private investments.
Thank you very much for that. I think this is what the time will allow us on the investment part of today. 3 fireside chats in less than an hour is a bit challenging, but we had some very good panelists helping us to shed some light on this. So thank you very much to Mr. Griffin in New York, but also very much thank you to Allan Pollock here in Copenhagen. And then we will have the jingle briefly again, and then we'll wrap this up. This was the last elements for today. So now I'll give the floor back to Finn Mortensen, the Executive Director of State of Green.
Thank you very much, Connie. And on behalf of the organizers, NYSERDA, which actually stands for New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, Danish Cleantech Hub in New York, Confederation of Danish Industry, and State of Green, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our moderator today, Connie Hedegaard. Thank you for taking us safely through the day, not only the physical, but also the online discussions. Also, let me take this opportunity to launch State of Green's new white paper, very timely, focusing on financing the green transition and how investments can enable a sustainable and green transition. In this white paper, You will find several cases from institutional investors such as PFA, whom we just heard from, and Pension Denmark. And you can learn more about crowdfunding initiatives, private sector financing in general, development funding, and funding for research and development. The white paper can be downloaded for free from our website, stateofgreen.com. Last but not least, a big thank you to all our speakers today, and an equally warm thank you to all of you around the world who have been following and engaging actively in this live stream. We hope you enjoyed today's session, and we look forward to future green talks and discussions across the Atlantic. Thank you very much, and goodbye.